entitlement for single seniors of 10%. Mr. Speaker, I'm looking at you to see if I have any time where I'm supposed to break now. I think I'm supposed to break now. I'll resume after. Thank you, sir.
The honourable member for Mont-Royal will have 6 minutes remaining for his speech when the House resumes the debate on this motion.
By members. Déclaration de député. L'honorable député.
The honourable member for Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, I would like to underscore the exceptional work done by the Women's Centre of Haut-Richelieu, a public education centre on the status of women. Founded in 1983, its mission is to improve the living conditions of women. This year, Lucie Boudreau and Francine Pilon, two women of great heart and intellect, received the prestigious recognition of Women Personalities 2016. These two members, or rather these two citizens of my riding of Saint-Jean, have worked hard and involved themselves in their respective communities, and we can see the influence of their work on gender equality in social and economic circles. I would like to congratulate the award recipients and the Women's Centre by pointing out that this organization has worked on tabling with Status of Women Canada, a project seeking to equip women for political life, thereby ensuring gender parity in decision-making bodies. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For Peace River, Westlaw.
Mr. Speaker, recently ECPAT International released a study showing Canada is a prominent child sex tourism destination, with Indigenous women and children being especially vulnerable. This report also reveals that the internet allows sex traffickers to easily advertise their victims online, often through the website Backpage.com. In April, Toronto police arrested two sex traffickers who forced a 16-year-old girl into prostitution. In May, 3 more sex traffickers were arrested in Toronto after trafficking a 17-year-old girl. Both girls were featured in ads on Backpage.com. Since 2013, Toronto police have investigated 359 sex trafficking cases. In each of these cases, every single girl was advertised on Backpage.com. This is a reality in other cities of Canada as well. The previous Conservative government ordered Craigslist to end similar ads in 2010, and they complied. I urge this Liberal government to demand Backpage.com to stop allowing victims of sex trafficking to be advertised in cities across Canada. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Davenport.
Monsieur le Président, love is
Mr. Speaker.
burns unseen, a wound that aches yet isn't felt, and always discontent, contentment, a pain that rages without hurting. So wrote one of the most revered of Portugal's poets, a man by the name of Luís de Camões, in one of his most famous poems, Amor e fogo que arte sem sever. Luís de Camões serves as a symbol of the Portuguese nation. The day of his death, June 10th, is the day that Portugal observes its National Day. It is also a day that Portugal celebrates its global Portuguese communities, its emigrants and their descendants living in communities all around the world. I'm proud to say that one such community is in my riding of Davenport, home to the largest Portuguese community in Canada. We will also join in on the celebrations right here on Parliament Hill in Ottawa. The Canada-Portugal Friendship Group, together with Portugal's ambassador to Canada, José Fernando Moreira da Cunha, is hosting the first ever Portugal Day on the Hill tomorrow evening, Tuesday, June 7th. You're all invited. Deseo a todos.
The honourable member for Courtenay Alberni.
Mr. Speaker, this week in Port Alberni, volunteers will be training how to best respond to a disaster caused by an earthquake or tsunami. These exercises put on by the province and local governments, along with the Red Cross and Salvation Army, will teach life-saving skills and emergency preparedness procedures. On Vancouver Island, we know that it's not a matter of if a big one will hit, but when a big one will hit. That's why we need federal leadership on emergency preparedness across jurisdictions. Sadly, all we've seen from the federal government is the cancelling of the Joint Emergency Preparedness Program, continued downloading onto provincial and local authorities, and the recent closure of Coast Guard MCTS Centre in Comox, which was the only communications centre not in a tsunami subduction zone. It's time Canadians, especially those in coastal communities, had the confidence that their federal government is there for them, ready for these kinds of emergencies, not if they strike, but when they strike.
Député de Ville-Marie, le Sud-Ouest, Île-des-Sœurs.
The honourable member for le Sud-Ouest Île-des-Sœurs.
Assalamu alaikum to you and all our Muslim sisters and brothers in Canada observing the fast of the holy month of Ramadan. As in many faiths, fasting is prescribed upon believers to help attain a higher state of consciousness and knowledge. During the blessed month of Ramadan, many Canadian Muslims enjoy fasting as a retreat to help clear the mind and strengthen body and spirit. Toutefois, le mois de Ramadan est...
However, the month of Ramadan is not only an opportunity to increase consciousness and purification, but also a month of sharing and mutual support with the most underprivileged of our society, thanks to charitable initiatives of mosques in our communities, including in my riding of Ville-Marie, le Sud-Ouest Île-des-Sœurs.
Member for Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to pay tribute to the Honourable Len Marchand, who passed away last week in Kamloops. Len was considered a true hero. His autobiography, entitled Breaking Trail, truly embodied what he achieved during his life. Len advocated for a stronger role for Indigenous people in Canadian political life. He was the first and only First Nations person to be elected 3 times in the House of Commons from British Columbia. In Ottawa, he was appointed as Parliamentary Secretary, as Minister of State, as Minister of the Environment, and latterly a Senator. According to the BC Lieutenant Government, upon receiving the Order of BC, Mr. Marchand was able to influence Canadian policy from the inside in a way that no other Aboriginal Canadian had ever been able to do. Beyond politics, his achievements were far-reaching and had a huge impact on our country and our community. A true gentleman, Len will be dearly missed. I know his legacy will live on, and I offer my sincere condolences to the family.
The honourable member for Scarborough Centre.
Mr. Speaker, today is first Ramadan. Ramadan is the 9th month in the Islamic calendar and is a very blessed and revered month for Muslims all over the world. The word Som or fasting is one of the 5 major pillars of Islam. Fasting is not just abstaining from eating and drinking from dusk to dawn. It teaches a person the principles of compassion and encourages patience and selflessness. As through fasting, we feel the pains of deprivation, but endure them patiently. It creates in a person the real spirit of social belonging, unity and brotherhood, of equality before God as well as before the law. Fasting has benefits like detoxifying and overhauling the body. It also provides a person with a transparent soul and a clear mind. I would like to wish all Canadians of Muslim faith Ramadan Kareem and Ramadan Mubarak. And in this blessed month, please make a special prayer for all our brothers and sisters in Fort McMurray. Thank you.
The honourable member for Mississauga, Erin Mills.
Mr. Speaker, today is the first day of Ramadan, the most auspicious month in the Islamic calendar. Over the next month, millions of Muslims will fast from sunrise to sunset without a morsel of food or a sip of water. Fasting is one of the main pillars of Islam, and it gives those that observe the fast a stronger sense of patience and a look into the lives of those less fortunate. Mr. Speaker, I want to wish every Canadian a Ramadan Mubarak. I hope this holy month brings each of us closer to our families and friends. Every evening as we gather for our iftar, which is the meal to break the fast for the day, and we break bread together, we strengthen the ties and relationships in our communities. Across Canada and in my riding of Mississauga, Erin Mills, we begin our fast and welcome the joyous celebrations this month will bring. In other news, Mr. Speaker, I'm hungry. Ramadan Mubarak.
The honourable member for Lanark, Frontenac, Kingston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the government is peddling a fictional narrative that it consulted the Conservative Party on its amendment to the NDP motion for a special committee on electoral reform. Here are the facts. The day the motion was debated, I did not learn that an amendment was in the works until moments before debate started. Even then, I was never shown a copy. As for advanced consultation, the day prior, the minister sent a note on a torn sheet of paper saying she wanted to chat. In a conversation that certainly did not last 5 minutes, she asked what I thought of the NDP motion without ever indicating that she was planning to seek amendments. So far was I from being a part of the subsequent negotiations that I reacted to the minister's peculiar little visit by going to the NDP critic's office to warn him that the Liberals were up to something. I was right, I just didn't guess what. If the Liberals want to pass off this kind of sandbagging as consultation, is it any wonder that Conservatives are adamant that the final consultation on any new voting system must take the form of a national referendum.
The member for Surrey Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I was 9 years old and it was Saturday morning. I woke up and saw my father and mother glued to the TV, only to find out that the place I had visited twice before, a place that mesmerized me because of its tranquility, radiance, and royalty, the Golden Temple, the holiest of Sikh Gurdwaras, built by Guru Ram Das himself, was being shot with heavy artillery, machine guns, and tanks. Mr. Speaker, all I could hear was my father saying, "I never thought this could happen. Who would attack a place of worship?" Thousands of worshippers had come to pray, but were confined as no one was allowed to leave. In the barrage of fire, thousands were killed, the healing waters turned red with blood, and the classical rags of music fell silent to the screams of the wounded. Mr. Speaker, while Sikhs will never forget 1984, we continue to pray that places of worship remain such, a place for prayer, reflection, and refuge. Thank you.
Member for Winnipeg Centre. Member for Winnipeg Centre.
Mr. Speaker, this weekend saw the passing of two public figures, both known as passionate fighters, each in their respective rings and arenas. Strong-minded and passionate, both fought for their communities, both addressed issues in the broader civil society. One of these figures was the world-renowned boxer Muhammad Ali. The other was a fighter and a hero to many throughout British Columbia, and indeed left a lasting impression on all Canadians, Len Marchand. Len was born in Vernon, BC, and a member of the Okanagan Indian Band. And as our Prime Minister so aptly put it, Canada has lost a trailblazer. Beginning his long career in federal politics as a staffer in 1965, Len became a special assistant to ministers within the Ministry of Indian Affairs. In the 1968 general election, underestimated and against huge odds, Len was elected to this House, making him the very first status Indian to join Parliament. He served as the Minister of Small Business and the Minister of the Environment and ended his political career serving in the Senate for 4 years. He was a leader that stood tall and would never fail in the tasks ahead of him. Our deepest condolences to his family and friends of this great role model and great Canadian.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg, Saint Charles. Mr. Speaker, on June 6, 1944, D-Day, the longest day, that was a day that marked human history. Close to 130,000 American, British, French, and Canadian soldiers stormed the Atlantic Wall in Normandy to free Europe from the Nazis. From across Canada, 21,400 of our heroes took part in the landing, and 1,063 died. It was the first day of an operation that would last close to 3 months, an arduous campaign. The efforts of Canadians allowed for the opening of the road to Caen, and from there, the liberation of France and Western Europe. As former commander of the Chaudière Regiment, the only French-Canadian unit to have taken part in the Juno Beach landing, I am honored to commemorate this historic day. On memory of those who fell on the fields of fighting to protect our freedom, I am eternally grateful, and we should all say, lest we forget.
The
Honourable Member for Longueuil, Charles Lemoine.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to thank our veterans on the 72nd anniversary of D-Day. The Royal Canadian Navy sent over 100 ships and 10,000 sailors as the Canadian contingent of over 14,000 soldiers landed in Normandy, France, including Juno Beach alongside the Allied troops. The success achieved in Normandy was the turning point in World War II. Canadians gave their lives to end the scourge of Nazi Germany. Nous sommes fiers de nos anciens combattants et nous sommes reconnaissants pour leur service.
We are grateful for their services and their sacrifice, which allows us to take advantage of our freedoms today and to ensure that the events of World War II never repeat themselves. The cost of the lives lost in wars past is the ultimate sacrifice. Let us remember those who sacrificed their lives for the good of our future.
For enormous sacrifice for our freedom. Thank you.
député de Sherbrooke.
The honourable member for Sherbrooke. Mr. Speaker, I am very pleased to announce that thanks to the Canada Summer Jobs Program, 322 young people from Sherbrooke will have a quality summer job in their area of study. I'd like to thank the government who doubled the budget envelope for this program. Thanks to over $1 million injected directly into my community, 124 organizations in Sherbrooke, which work in a diversity of sectors, will be able to offer some 100 students their first real job. Without this funding, these unique job opportunities would simply not exist. This will be my 6th season where I will be able to see the success of this program and the remarkable benefits of Summer Jobs Canada. Therefore, I wish all the organizations and young people who are benefiting from this program a fun and interesting summer, and I hope they can benefit from this learning. Happy summer to all Sherbrooke residents.
Now the member for Selkirk, Interlake, Eastman.
Mr. Speaker, today is the 72nd anniversary of D-Day, one of the most important military victories of all time. On this day in 1944, the Allied forces in the Second World War achieved one of the most significant victories in history. Nearly 150,000 Allied troops courageously stormed the beaches of Normandy. Over 14,000 Canadian soldiers fearlessly fought shoulder to shoulder with our allies in the face of tyranny and fascism. All aspects of the Canadian Armed Forces were engaged in this historic battle. The 3rd Canadian Infantry Division landed ashore with our allies. The Royal Canadian Navy provided support in the waters, and the Royal Canadian Air Force helped prepare the invasion by bombing targets. Canadian troops were able to take Juno Beach and push farther into enemy territory than any of our allies. This victory forever altered the course of the Second World War and all of history. As a result, we're able to enjoy freedom, democracy, and the rule of law, cornerstones of our Canadian way of life. 355 Canadians never returned from the beaches of Normandy. We are eternally grateful for their sacrifice, lest we forget.
Now the member for Winnipeg South.
Mr. Speaker, today I rise in this House to say Ramadan Mubarak and Ramadan Kareem and offer my best wishes to the Muslim community for the first day of fasting in the holy month of Ramadan. During Ramadan, Muslims will be fasting between the hours of sunrise and sunset, and they will practice zakat, which demonstrates selflessness and compassion for those less fortunate. These actions embody the very values we cherish as Canadians. Mr. Speaker, this is an important time to be thankful for the rich cultural and religious diversity that we are privileged to share in Canada. During this holy month, I stand with Winnipeg's community, Muslim community, to celebrate the spirit of Ramadan. Ramadan Mubarak, Ramadan Kareem. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions orales, oral questions. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals say they will abandon their plans to change our voting system if they don't have widespread public support. Yet they refuse to commit to the most transparent and accessible way of gauging that public support, which is a referendum. Does the Prime Minister think making such a significant change should be behind closed doors by a handful of Liberal cabinet ministers, or will he finally commit to giving Canadians a direct say in the future of their democracy?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, in the last election, Canadians overwhelmingly voted for parties that had committed to moving beyond first past the post, which is why in our committee we are happy to reflect a broad range of voices from Canadians and are glad to work with opposition parties to ensure that there are strong voices heard on all sides of the issue. That's the kind of consultations and engagement that Canadians expect to hear and see when we talk about electoral reform. That's exactly the kind of engagement that the previous government did none of.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Well, Mr. Speaker, every Canadian expects to have a direct say in the future of their democracy. Monsieur le Président, en 2000...
Mr. Speaker, in 2012, the current Minister of Foreign Affairs said that the referendum was essential to change the voting system, that we needed the support of the people. So there's one thing that has the support of the people, and that's a referendum. Will the Prime Minister listen to his own minister and finally make a commitment to holding a referendum. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Such an open and complex question as how to change our voting system requires committed consultation. A lot of voices have to be heard, experts from various parties and Canadians, about how we can improve our voting system. That is a more complex process than the yes or no in a referendum. This is an issue that requires input from a lot of people with a lot of different perspectives on the values that underlie our voting system and our good governance in this country. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, in 2012, the current Foreign Affairs Minister wrote a policy paper on electoral reform in which he said, "Precedent makes holding a referendum necessary in Canada. Changing the voting system would require popular support." One thing that does have the popular support of Canadians right now, and that is if you change our voting system, Canadians want a say. Right. If the Prime Minister won't listen to Canadians on this, will he at least listen to his minister and give Canadians a referendum?
The Honourable Prime Minister. A couple of years ago, Mr. Speaker, the previous government changed our electoral processes and as a way of barring many people from being able to vote or trying to, and Canadians made themselves heard in the general election, rejecting not just the platform that the other party put forward, but their entire approach, which is why we favour an approach that is engaged, open, consultative, drawing in multiple voices with different ideas about how to improve our electoral system, and we look forward to a strong and robust process.
The Honourable Member for Richmond-Tabasco. Mr. Speaker, have you ever played To Tell the Truth? We'll try today. 1. The Prime Minister said that 2015 was the last election with the current electoral system. His principal secretary indicated on Twitter, the preferred network of the Minister of Democratic Institutions, that a referendum was one option to be considered. The minister mentioned that if she didn't have the support of the people, she would not have the reform. Who's telling the truth? 3/4 of Canadians are demanding a referendum. When is the minister going to listen to them? The Honourable Minister. The reality is that my colleague just explained how we are committed in various ways and open to all kinds of different prospects on this important issue. Contrary to the way they used to do things, where one person counted in any discussion or proposal, we have multiple voices examining important issues, and we are eager to have the input and perspectives of Canadians on the electoral system. The Honourable Member for Richmond-Tabasco. Let's continue to play To Tell the Truth. 4. The member for Mont-Royal said that a referendum was a tool that could be used. 5. The government House Leader first rejected and then showed some openness to a referendum. And 6. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, in his own essay, said, and I quote, "Referendums are essential in Canada to change the electoral system, and we need popular support." When will the Prime Minister listen to his own caucus and demand a referendum so that all Canadians can express their views on this? The Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we see that the members opposite haven't yet understood what an engaged caucus with different perspectives and visions really is. They only have one voice, one line of thought, and have had for a long time. We exchange among ourselves on different views, and we are building together in a collaborative and consultative way to have the best approach for Canadians. I know they've never seen such a thing, but that's the way we operate. The Honourable Member for Hochelaga.
Leader James Cowan has now joined the growing number of Canadians saying Bill C-14 is likely unconstitutional. Cowan said this government legislation is so flawed that Canadians would be better off with no legislation at all. This bill does not respect the Supreme Court's decision, and it will be tied up in courts for years. Instead of ramming through C-14, Will the government listen to James Cowan and work on getting this bill right the first time?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, if there was ever an example of why the reforms that the Liberal Party made to the Senate over the past years, removing partisanship and patronage from that place, there is no better example than the NDP highlighting the great work the Senate is doing, weighing in on an important piece of legislation. I thank the honourable member for her comments about the excellent work done by independent voices in the Senate, and I look forward to hearing what the Senate has to say about C-14 when it returns to us.
The honourable member for Hochelaga. The government had an opportunity to do things differently on C-14, but it chose to ignore the experts, not work with the opposition, and limit debate. And yet, warnings came from all quarters. The Minister of Health of Quebec called Bill C-14 unenforceable. In his opinion, the concept of reasonably foreseeable death is medically impracticable. He refuses to include it in the Quebec legislation. Will the government finally realize that C-14 must be amended? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, in the debates on C-14, we listened to many politicians from different parties who had different opinions, but we did something else. We listened to doctors, we listened to Canadians, we consulted widely across the country in order to make sure that a measure that's so important as medically assisted dying is done in the right way, to respect the rights and freedoms of everyone while protecting the most vulnerable. That's the balance we sought to strike, and that's what we are proud of having done.
Protesting, Mr. Speaker. Peter HoC, Canada's foremost constitutional scholar, today testified that Bill C-14 fails to respect the Carter decision and will undoubtedly be struck down as soon as it gets to court. He said the government cannot turn around and exclude a group of people who the Supreme Court clearly ruled have these charter rights. Mr. Speaker, it's never too late for the government to do the right thing. Will the Liberals finally respect the Charter and announce they're willing to fix this bill?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberal Party this government recognizes that this is a big step in the history of our country, and making sure that we do that in a responsible and thoughtful way that both upholds Canadians' rights and freedoms while defending the most vulnerable is exactly what we have done with this piece of legislation. But on top of that, we made sure that we heard from Canadians, we heard from experts, and we allowed and encouraged a free vote in the House of Commons. Unfortunately, it's disappointing that the NDP didn't allow themselves a free vote on this issue.
The member for Victoria.
The Liberals' stubborn refusal to listen to experts and work with the opposition will mean, Mr. Speaker, suffering Canadians spending years in court defending rights they've already won. Mr. Speaker, Kay Carter's family is also disillusioned with this government. They said today they felt betrayed. Today, they called out the Prime Minister for his refusal to listen to Canadians. If they really disagree with the Alberta Court of Appeal, the Ontario Court, Canada's foremost constitutional scholar, will they at least now table the government's legal opinion on the bill so Canadians can judge for themselves?
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what Canadians expect of this government is to make sure that we are both defending the rights and freedoms of Canadians while protecting the most vulnerable. And that's exactly the balance that we have struck with C-14. We, throughout, have been open to amendments, including accepting amendments from opposition members. We look forward to hearing the deliberations that the Senate is carrying forward on this same piece of legislation, and we are ensuring that this big step that Canada is taking, despite people who think it goes too far, others who think it's not going far enough, is done the right way. Merci.
The honourable member for Lanark, Frontenac, Kingston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Friday, the minister told the CBC, quote, "If an overwhelming majority of Canadians tell us that they want System X, we will listen to what they've said." One logical implication of the minister's words is that if the Liberal proposal for electoral reform is supported by an underwhelming minority of Canadians, say under 50% in a national referendum, then it ought not to be imposed on the nation for election 2019. Either the minister's words mean she favours a referendum or they mean nothing at all and are meant simply to misdirect us. Which of the two is correct?
The Honourable Minister of Democratic Institutions.
Mr. Speaker,
We have said from the very beginning that we will not move forward on any reforms to our electoral system without the broad support of Canadians. This means it is vitally important for the Special All-Party Committee to begin its work of hearing from Canadians firsthand what their needs and what values they'd like to see reflected in their electoral system. I look forward to support from all members in this House when this vote is up for discussion tomorrow.
The honourable member for Lanark, Frontenac, Kingston.
Mr. Speaker, last week the Toronto Star said, quote, "If the Liberal government truly wants broad buy-in from Canadians on electoral reform, it should hold a referendum and let people vote," end quote. It said a referendum is, quote, "the only way to guarantee that electoral reform has democratic legitimacy." Therefore, I ask the Minister again, and particularly given her earlier words on Friday, does she support a national referendum, or was she just saying all that stuff as a way of misdirecting us?
Minister of Democratic Institutions.
Mr. Speaker, I will repeat what I said in this place on Thursday and so many other times before. There is at least a three-step process for us to undertake. The first step is to establish the committee and have them go out and hear from Canadians. The second step is for us to come up with a plan and debate that plan in this House. The third step, Mr. Speaker, is where my honourable colleague is at, which is determining whether or not the recommended reforms have the broad buy-in of Canadians. Let's get on with the first step, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Banff Airdrie.
Mr. Speaker, in 2012, the Minister of Foreign Affairs said that, and I quote, "Precedent makes holding a referendum necessary in Canada. Changing the voting system would require popular support." So if that minister actually believes his own words, will he try to convince the Prime Minister that Canadians deserve a direct say through a vote in a referendum on any changes to how they vote?
The Minister of Democratic Institutions.
Mr. Speaker, our government is entering electoral reform with an open mind. As the member opposite well knows, the amended motion that we put on that the NDP put on the table late last week allows for the committee to investigate ways of determining how to engage Canadians' broad support. This is an important addition, Mr. Speaker, that we added to the motion to address the honourable colleague's concerns and look forward to unanimous support of the House on this matter tomorrow.
The member for Banff Airdrie.
Well, much like other times, we keep hearing about the interest of political parties and of politicians. Well, Mr. Speaker, the discussion on changing our most basic democratic institution is not about political parties, nor about the interest of politicians. It's about the Canadian people. It should be about making sure that each and every Canadian voice has an opportunity to have a direct say through a referendum. So will the Liberals hold one, yes or no?
The Minister of Democratic Institutions.
Mr. Speaker, it appears that we have found common ground. The one thing that we can all agree in this House is crucial to the success of us being able to modernize our electoral system is first hearing from Canadians. That is why, Mr. Speaker, we committed to bringing forward an all-parliamentary committee to hear from Canadians, to act as a forum, to hear their thoughts and aspirations for their electoral reform. I'm really looking forward to this vote tomorrow and unanimous support from all members.
Member for Lakeland.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberal approach to electoral reform is a bit strange. They believe the current system makes it difficult for people to vote, yet record numbers of Canadians voted in 2015. And in the 1992 referendum on the Charlottetown Accord, nearly 75% of eligible Canadians voted. 3/4 of Canadians are demanding to have their say again. Will the Liberals hold a referendum on fundamental changes to how Canadians vote?
Minister of Democratic Institutions.
Mr. Speaker, the former government did not consult Canadians or experts or Elections Canada on the changes they brought forward through the Fair Elections Act. So I totally understand why bringing a committee forward to hear from Canadians is a strange concept to them. We have entered this process with an open mind, Mr. Speaker, and look forward to getting down the work of hearing from Canadians and moving away from a hyper-partisan debate on process.
The honourable member for Lakeland.
I think the minister doesn't need to patronize us, and the fact is this isn't up for politicians to decide, it's up to Canadians. And we keep asking these questions because our answers answers make no sense. 100% of Canadian voters deserve to have a direct say in how they will elect their governments. What is so hard to understand? So my question, once again, will the minister finally listen to Canadians and agree to hold a referendum on how they vote?
Well, Minister of Democratic Institutions.
Mr. Speaker, our commitment is to hear directly from Canadians. Our hope is that all 338 members in this House will advocate on behalf of their constituents and contribute constructively to the substance of electoral reform. Mr. Speaker, I hope that the move tomorrow, with the vote tomorrow, will allow us to move away from an unproductive partisan debate on process to the substance of electoral reform and ensuring that all Canadians, including young people who are not yet old enough to vote, can be part of this important conversation.
The honourable member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. Mr. Speaker, the medically assisted dying legislation is historic, and the government was to behave properly. It did the opposite. It knew the deadline was tight, but only tabled its bill in April. It refuses to listen to experts. Today, Peter HoC, one of this country's most highly respected constitutional experts, said once again that C-14 did not pass the charter test or the Carter decision test. What are the Liberals waiting for to change their attitude and do things properly?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and appreciate the question. We have sought to ensure that we hear from a diversity of voices in this country with respect to this incredibly difficult and complex issue. To paraphrase the Supreme Court of Canada, the court does not have a monopoly on the protection and promotion of rights, and Parliament has to do its job to be an ally to the vulnerable. We've sought to find a balance between the diversity of views and perspectives in this country, balancing personal autonomy and protecting the vulnerable.
The honourable member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. Medically assisted dying is a question of rights, but first and foremost, it's a human question. The Carter family, which fought for years alongside their mother to have Canada recognize the right to die in dignity, said today that it felt betrayed by the Liberal government. For a government that claims to be listening to Canadians, it only listens to those who agree with it. So now that the government has failed to pass its legislation before June 7th, what is it waiting for to have legislation passed that respects the Charter and the Carter decision?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're incredibly mindful of the deadline of the Supreme Court of Canada, and it is incumbent upon parliamentarians to put in place a national framework around medical assistance in dying to ensure that there are the appropriate and necessary safeguards in place, to ensure certainty for medical practitioners, and to ensure that there is access for patients who want to access medical assistance in dying. This is an incredibly complex discussion. We have certainly listened to the voices of Canadians, and it's the voices of Canadians that have contributed towards C-14.
Member for Selkirk, Interlake Eastman.
Mr. Speaker, from helicopters to submarines and now to fighter jets, the legacy of the Liberals is to buy old and make do. The Liberals have made up their mind to buy the Super Hornet and now are working on the right narrative to support it. Let's be perfectly clear. The Liberals are only sole sourcing the Super Hornets to fulfill an ill-advised political campaign promise. Simply put, the Canadian Armed Forces deserve a lot better. Will the Prime Minister admit he broke his promise for an open and fair competition to replace our fighter jets?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, the government is committed to a well-equipped and modern Air Force. Unfortunately, the last 5 years has been a bit of a loss. And as a consequence, there is a developing capability gap which needs to be managed. We have obligations to NATO, we have obligations to NORAD, we have obligations to our own defense and to expeditionary matters. Accordingly, Mr. Speaker, we are proceeding forward on this matter, and we will be moving towards a decision soon.
Member for Selkirk, Interlake Eastman.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Liberals won't even use our fighter jets to defeat and degrade ISIS. And the Liberal suggestion that our fighter jets are literally on their last legs is patently false. We know that our fighter jets can operate effectively until 2025, and there is no urgency to replace it on an interim basis. The Liberals don't need to sole source the Super Hornet to transition from the CF-18 to avoid their imaginary capability gap. Why are the Liberals misleading Canadians and breaking their promise for a fair and transparent competition?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, due to the inaction of the previous government, we are developing a capability gap, and that capability gap needs to be managed. So 4 years out, 5 years out, 10 years out, the Chief of Defence needs to be thinking about how to manage that capability gap. Accordingly, the Minister has taken the responsible action, and he is moving forward with making a decision sooner rather than later, which should have happened maybe 5 years ago now.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, senior officials have confirmed that the Liberal government has already made a decision to purchase Super Hornet F-18s. Before the announcement, the only thing left to do is to build a narrative to justify the acquisition. While they were promising to hold an open and transparent competition, the result was already written by the Liberals, another broken Liberal promise. Can the government confirm that it intends to acquire the Super Hornet? And on what expert advice is this decision based?
Mr. Speaker, as I said in earlier response to a question, the unfortunate reality is that we have lost 5 years on this particular procurement. As a consequence, we are now approaching a situation where we have a capability gap. If we're going to manage the capability gap, Mr. Speaker, we need to move to the point of making a decision. Unlike the previous government, Mr. Speaker, we will be making a decision.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the current CF-18 fleet was refurbished in order to allow it to operate till 2025, allowing us transition to the next fighter jet. The emergency situation described by the Liberals seems to be made to measure to allow the Prime Minister not to acquire the F-35. Is the Minister aware of the risk of lawsuits and the negative impact on Canadian companies involved in the F-35?
Mr. Speaker, the irony of getting a question from the Conservative Party having manufactured, in effect, this capability gap is ironic to the extreme. We are therefore in a position where we are going to have to make serious decisions about the replacement for the CF-18. We cannot any longer carry on in the fashion that we've been carrying on. So had these decisions actually been addressed and done in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, Mr. Speaker, we wouldn't be here talking about this matter today.
The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Temiskaming. 7 months in office and replacing our CF-18s doesn't appear to be on their radar. And yet we've known for years that they needed replacing. Need I say that replacing military equipment takes planning? You can't just go to the military equipment section at Toys R Us. We're talking about what our soldiers need, the right tools for the job. When will the government set up an open process to replace our CF-18s?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member will know, being in the NDP party, that for the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, the CF-18 decision has been pending and continue to pend. Had the previous government actually done something more than get in and out of photo ops, possibly we wouldn't actually be talking about this at this point.
The honourable member for Esquimalt, Saanich, Sooke.
Speaker, during the campaign, the Liberals said they would not purchase the F-35, but right after being elected, they said maybe yes, maybe no. Now it looks like they may have already decided on another fighter jet, but still without the promised open and transparent competition. In fact, it looks like the Liberal government is running procurement as an inside job, just like the Conservatives. Why have they abandoned an open tender process to replace our aging CF-18s? And when will they put in place a procurement system that can actually deliver the equipment our military needs?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, as you know, we inherited a procurement system that by many measurements was a broken procurement system. Accordingly, the minister has had to take serious decisions. All ministers, in fact, have had to take serious decisions with respect to getting the equipment that the honourable member and I would agree is equipment that needs to replace the CF-18. Accordingly, we are proceeding with the decision process, and hopefully we'll have a decision soon.
Member for Nickel Belt. Mr. Speaker, one important thing the government has done since it took office was to restore the importance of science. That's something that the Conservative government had relegated to the back burner. Canada is making progress in high-tech sectors. One of those sectors is clean energy. Can the Minister of Natural Resources inform this House about the new Canadian strategy around this? The Honourable Minister.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague from Nickel Belt for his question. I was in San Francisco last week, where I announced that Canada would double its funding for clean energies for a total amount of $775 million by 2020. Those investments will be a way for this government to show its full leadership on climate change. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, soon Syrian refugees will see their 1 year of government funding support terminate, and moreover, many of these refugees can't access training to learn English or French. A refugee at committee last week said through a translator, "No, I'm not working. How can I work if I don't know the English to communicate?" His family's already had to turn to food banks to make ends meet. So when will the Liberals admit that by failing to have any comprehensive plan to provide Syrian refugees with language training, these refugees may require social assistance after their year of funding runs out?
Minister of Immigration.
Mr. Speaker, we certainly have a comprehensive plan to provide language training because we understand that success in English or French is key to finding a job and key to success in Canada. And that is why the government has funded $600 million for settlement in 2016-17, $27 million extra for the new refugees, and language is very much at the top of our priorities.
I'll member for Calgary Nose Hill.
This refugee at committee begged to differ. He said, when asked about his wife's chances to learn English, "Her situation is worse than mine. I try my best to learn English on the streets, through my friends, through some acquaintances. She doesn't have that chance because she mainly stays at home with the kids." Will the Liberals admit that their lack of a plan to provide language training to Syrian refugees is creating gender inequity and isolating these women, or will they continue to treat these women simply as photo ops?
The Minister of Immigration.
Mr. Speaker, we are working very hard through our funding to provide language training to men, to women, and to children. We also understand that many of the Syrian refugee mothers have significant numbers of children to look after, and therefore they need childcare facilities to help them with the language training. We understand there is more work to do in that area, but we are working very hard through the settlement ages to provide that funding to support language training for everybody.
Member for Parry Sound, Muskoka.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's becoming increasingly clear that the Liberals will cave in to Chinese belligerence at the drop of the proverbial hat. Last week, at the insistence of the Chinese government, the Prime Minister bowed to demands to meet not with the President, but with their Foreign Minister, who then took time out of his busy schedule to berate a Canadian journalist while our Foreign Minister kept as quiet as a church mouse. When will the Liberals grow a backbone and ensure Canadian foreign policy is actually run by Canadians?
Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, what we actually need to grow up is the relationship between Canada and a sixth of humanity, China, that has been so damaged by the former government. And this is why we need to make progress in every aspect, including human rights, including the rule of law. And it's what I've said, the Prime Minister said very clearly in the meetings with the Minister of Foreign Affairs of China. It's what I have said during the conference he just mentioned, and it's what I have said also in my subsequent relationship with the minister. So we'll continue to improve the relationship with China and to advocate the case for human rights everywhere in the world, including in China.
Member for Thornhill.
Well, Mr. Speaker, by any realistic measure, last week's visit by China's foreign minister did not go so well. Again, the Prime Minister broke with protocol and caved in to Minister Wang's demand for a meeting. Then Canada's minister stood silent while the Chinese minister angrily scolded a Canadian journalist. Mr. Speaker, when will the Liberals stand up to China and demand meaningful answers on China's human rights transgressions?
Foreign Affairs.
Two things that are erroneous in the comment. The first one is that, of course, I was not silent regarding human rights, including in the press conference, and I'm in obligation to hurt my proverbial.
Member for Abbotsford, I ask him to try to restrain himself. I know he's excited about all this, but I know he can restrain himself from commenting until whenever he may have the floor. But right now, the Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs has the floor.
So it will hurt my proverbial modesty, Mr. Speaker, but I need to quote myself. It's what I've said during the press conference. In our international engagement, Canada will continue to champion the value of pluralism, democracy, inclusive and accountable governance, respect for diversity, and universal human rights. And about the practice for foreign affairs ministers to meet leaders of the world, I'm meeting leaders of the world everywhere in the world, and the Prime Minister will certainly be willing to meet foreign affairs ministers.
The Honourable Member for Berthier-Masquinongé. Last week, thousands of dairy farmers came to Ottawa to protest over the government's failure to protect them against dye-filtered milk. Farmers have lost millions due to the government's failure to enforce its own regulations. Now they're trying to convince us that opening our markets up with the Trans-Pacific Partnership will be beneficial. What do they take us for? How are farmers supposed to feel better about the TPP when the government can't even enforce its own import regulations? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, we're consulting dairy farmers all across the country on the TPP. We haven't taken a stand yet, Mr. Speaker, but once we've taken that stand, if necessary, we will ensure that we consult and compensate if necessary. The Honourable Member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. Mr. Speaker, the TPP is also cause for concern to our cultural industries. It explicitly prevents government from developing policies to support Canadian content on digital platforms. On one hand, the Heritage Minister is holding consultations on digital. On the other, her government is signing a deal that will fettle its own capacity to intervene on the Internet. The Minister will have her hands tied, but the government promised to protect our cultural diversity in trade deals. How does the Minister explain this discrepancy to our artists? The Honourable Minister of Canadian Heritage. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To our government, creating Canadian content is a priority, and that applies to content creators as well. Trade negotiations have always been an opportunity to maintain our capacity to support our creators, and that's still the case today in our negotiations in connection with the TPP. We also want to seize opportunities that these negotiations provide, and that is why our government is determined to listen to Canadians, and that's also why the Minister of International Trade.
Mr. Speaker, from day one, the Liberals have shown a complete lack of interest in the needs of small businesses. After ending the small business hiring credit, they broke their promise to lower the small business tax rate. The Chamber of Commerce says businesses are worried about a big CPP tax increase, which they say is, quote, headed for the middle class like an elbow in the chest, end of quote. Why is the Finance Minister so intent on squeezing every penny he can out of middle-class businesses and workers?
Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, we are focused on ensuring that Canadians have the opportunity to retire in dignity. We started down this path immediately on getting elected. We told Canadians that this is something we wanted to do. We moved forward with improving the guaranteed income supplement for seniors in poverty. We changed the OAS system so that we can help seniors to get their retirement when they can. And we're working collaboratively with the provinces to enhance our Canada Pension Plan, which is an investment in the future of Canadians, allowing Canadians to have a retirement in dignity. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Mr. Speaker, hardworking Canadians cannot afford to pay more taxes. And the Canadian Federation of Independent Business said that no business can afford higher payroll taxes either. But the Finance Minister is again putting Canadian jobs at risk. The Liberals have already backed off on their election promise to lower the small business tax rate. Now they're going to raise payroll taxes. Why is the Finance Minister killing the backbone of the Canadian economy with irresponsible CPP payroll tax hikes?
Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to remind the member opposite that what we're trying to do is enhance the Canada Pension Plan. That's a plan where Canadians can save. It's a plan where we can invest money so that people can have a retirement in dignity. We know that working together with the provinces, we can achieve a real difference for Canadians, helping them to have a retirement in dignity, to save appropriately for that, and we are committed to doing that together with our finance ministers and our provinces in collaboration.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. The problem with this government is that every time they open their mouth, things never balance. The tax changes were supposed to be cost neutral, but they're creating a $1.7 billion deficit. Now the government's fixing to change the pension system. Our fear is that higher contributions will come at the expense of job creation. Can the government undertake not to increase taxes on Canadians? The Honourable Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, we want to have a retirement system that allows Canadians to retire with dignity. That's why we want to improve our retirement system. I'm working in cooperation with the provinces to help Canadians prepare for a dignified retirement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, when we were elected, we promised to help the middle-class families and grow the economy. An important way to achieve this objective is to ensure that young Canadians are able to find work and get the experience required in the job market. We remember how the previous government spent more time putting up billboards than creating jobs for young Canadians. Can the Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Labour inform this House of the success of the Canada Summer Jobs Programme?
Minister of Employment.
Thank you. I want to thank the honourable member from Avalon and report to the House that this government understands the importance of meaningful work in a summer job. That's why we promised to double the number of jobs this summer. In fact, we have more than double. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to say that every honourable member in this House worked hard, and we not only doubled, we increased the number of jobs to 77,000 jobs this summer, and it's because of the commitment of the Minister of Youth that we were able to keep the promise and focus on what's important.
Member for Battleford, Lloydminster.
Well, that they got neutral, Mr. Speaker. The jobs are for half as long. Mr. Speaker, the Leaders' Declaration from the G7 and Japan has clear commitments to regional trade agreements like the TPP. Yet the Prime Minister seems more inclined to push for an early deal with China. While that's a very important market for us, the Prime Minister has also said, and I'd like to quote, "It's important that people know that when they sign a deal with Canada, a change in government isn't going to lead to that contract being ripped up." Since he supported the Leaders' Declaration, why won't he prioritize the TPP before holding trade talks with China?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for International Trade.
Mr. Speaker, first of all, let me say that increased trade relationships with China are in the Minister's mandate letter, but we are not in negotiations for a trade agreement right now. We will take a cautious, step-by-step approach. As regards the PTP, Mr. Speaker, we promised during the election, because it was a deal that we had not yet seen, that we would study it carefully. We are continuing to do that. We are doing our own studies. We are taking in studies. The committee is studying, and we will, Mr. Speaker, come to a position on that when the time is right. Thank you.
Windsor West.
People in Windsor have fought for a long time for a new border crossing with the United States. Manufacturers, farmers, and other key sectors are left wondering whether the government will deliver the Gordie Howe International Border Crossing on time. This means jobs and investment for Canada, as this region accounts for 40% of the daily trade between Canada and the United States. Mr. Speaker, to the Prime Minister, his government has already missed two important deadlines for this crucial infrastructure. Can the Prime Minister confirm today that his government is on track to make this bridge crossing happen by 2020? This is his opportunity to reassure the citizens and the industries from manufacturing.
The Honourable Minister of Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, our government is committed to building the Gordie Howe International Bridge is unwavering. Nearly 30% of the surface trade, as Honourable Member has mentioned, crosses this very, very important crossing. This is very critical for us to continue to grow our trade with the United States. And the first step of the process, where we listed all the companies to build this bridge, and that is already had happened. We are on the next stage.
Member for Don Valley East.
Mr. Speaker, headquartered in my riding of Don Valley East, Thales Canada is a global leader in the development of high technologies in aerospace, urban transportation, security, and urban science. In addition, Thales Canada is a leader in the promotion of gender diversity and equality in the workplace.
Can the Minister tell the House of Commons how the government can make sure Canada keeps supporting innovative companies like Thales?
Merci.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of National Revenue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the member for her question and for her work supporting Canadian entrepreneurship.
The budget shows how committed we are to promoting Canadian innovation. We are investing about $4.5 billion as a down payment to start the innovation agenda, with investments in initiatives such as strengthening business clusters, building post-secondary infrastructure, and extending broadband service. This is an agenda for change, Mr. Speaker. It will address the economic challenges, grow our businesses, and help us take the next steps towards growing a more innovative economy.
The Honourable Member for Kamloops Thompson Caribou.
Mr. Speaker, the First Nations Transparency Act gave band members for the first time ever access to critical information such as salaries, expenses of their leaders, and audited financial statements. On Friday, the minister admitted to Canadians, and I quote, "No formal consultations were held before gutting the act." Does the minister not believe that band members should have input into a decision that affects them so directly?
Minister of Indigenous and Northern Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, the department again was not in charge at that time. As the opposition critic, we consulted broadly through that time, and we know exactly what First Nations feel about transparency. Accountability is very important to everyone. We have to do it their way, not the way the Conservatives did it.
Honourable Member for Rivière-du-Nord. Because the price of lumber on Crown land in Quebec was set by auction, it's higher and puts our businesses at a competitive disadvantage under free trade. Under the softwood lumber deal, Quebec lost a significant market share to BC. And although Quebec is pro-free trade, we don't have national status yet. The federal government negotiates on our behalf, but they haven't answered any of our questions in the past 6 months. If Ottawa accepts a protectionist deal, will it exempt Quebec so that only NAFTA applies to Quebec? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, this government recognizes the importance of the forestry industry to Quebec and to Canada. We are currently negotiating with our American partners. The minister this morning met with industry representatives in Montreal. We're in close contact with stakeholders, with the Government of Quebec, and with other provincial governments. We're working together to come up with a deal that's good for Canada. The Honourable Member for Mirabel. Mr. Speaker, about 50 years ago, thousands were run out of their homes by the federal government to make way for Mirabel Airport, a colonialist fiasco of historic proportions. Today, those who are expropriated and their heirs want their land back when it goes up for sale. Will the government give those people due consideration when it sells that land? Will it give them the right of first refusal when the expropriated land is put up for sale and officially apologize to them? The Honourable Minister of Transport. Mr. Speaker, I'm aware of the situation when it comes to the expropriated Mirabel lands. The top priority of the sale is to allow tenant farmers to purchase the land that they were renting. There's about 750 acres that remains to be sold. That's 5% of the territory reserved for the airport. The federal government will proceed in the coming weeks to sell off the remaining lands, and it will all be done consistent with the real estate management policy.
Speaker, June 17th will be the World Day to Combat Desertification. This is an area where Canada was once extremely helpful. We even hosted the 5th meeting of the Treaty to Combat Desertification, having ratified it in 1995. It's a key instrument not just for developing countries, but for dealing with increasing drought here within Canada. Shamefully, the previous government withdrew us in 2013. I want to know when Canada will be back. Can the Prime Minister tell us specifically if Canada can rejoin the Convention?
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we recognize not just the link between land degradation and climate change, but also the risks that desertification poses to realizing the Sustainable Development Goals. We are coordinating with our international partners to implement the 2030 Agenda and its ambitious objectives to eradicate poverty, fight inequality and injustice, and tackle climate change. We recognize the important work of the UN Convention to Combat Desertification.
Order. The Honourable Prime Minister has the floor. Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We recognize the important work done by the UN Convention to Combat Desertification and look forward to updating this House soon, possibly on June 17th itself.
Excellent.
This will conclude question period. I believe the Honourable Member for New Westminster Burnaby is rising on a point of order.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister misled the House during question period when he said that the NDP had a whipped vote on C-14. He knows that is not the case. He knows on this side of the House it was a free vote. But the NDP caucus is united in its determination that C-14 as it is
This is clearly debate. The member knows. I appreciate his intervention. Tabling of documents.